Every piece I make is a conversation between my hands and the wood. But this one, the Almari, feels more like a full-blown debate, the kind where nobody's yelling but someone ends up sanding at 2 a.m. This cabinet started long before the first cut. It's a marker of my own evolution, from mid-century modern's clean, confident geometry to something far, far greater, something that I've started calling refined modernism. You still find the structure, the purpose, the discipline, but now there's a bit of a curve, a bit of a sass. Let's unpack it with this build that we're doing now.
Yes. Move.
So in the beginning of this, you got to start with what everyone has to start with, and that's preparing all the boards. So I'm preparing all the panel pieces, getting all of this squared up, getting everything lined up, getting everything nice and square so that we can glue it all together, make sure that everything fits, doing the wood selection, choosing everything, making sure it all looks right. It's one of the main processes, one of the main starting processes that a lot of people overlook, because it's going to dictate exactly what your piece looks like afterwards. And if you're not going to choose the right pieces to go together, the right bits to stand side by side with the right grain orientation, everything's just going to look all wrong. Everything's just going to be confused, everything's just going to be out of whack, and you're just going to stand back and look at it, and someone's going to realize that you didn't put much thought into what this was actually going to look like afterwards. Now, I'm not the kind of guy that likes to draw things out. I love to imagine a project, think about what it's going to look like, and then just go for it. Start designing on the ball, start working with the pieces of wood, putting them together, seeing if this other piece will fit better with that piece. And then as you build, you just start evolving. You just start seeing, okay, maybe this line's not going to look great there, maybe that line looks a little bit better there, maybe I should put a curve here, maybe I should do this there. I had the idea of doing a draw in this place, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to change that for this. So many different things. I get people wanting to draw things out and get people to want to understand exactly what the end result is going to be. And for me, I personally find that not knowing what I'm going to make right at the end of it, having a good idea of what I want to make, but not knowing how it's going to come together, building on the fly, if you want to call it that, is the way I create. It's the way my process works best. It's the way that I think best. I problem solve all the time. If I had to draw something out, I probably wouldn't have to problem solve anything at all. But for me, that's not creative. For me, you've got an idea, you've got a vision, and you start working at it, and you start seeing how everything talks to each other, how one piece of timber talks to the other piece of timber. And from there, you can just feel whether it's going to feel right. 9 times out of 10, it works out wonderfully. It works out absolutely beautifully. But there are times where it looks absolutely rubbish. And then you got to start again. But if I had to draw everything out and follow an exact pattern line by line, I think I'd go crazy. It would. I feel like working with my hands, making things all the time, is the opposite of having a desk job. And if I had to draw everything out and make sure that everything fit perfectly, everything lined up 100%, I would just go crazy. I would lose half the joy of doing the job in the beginning. Look, this is not to say that this is for everyone. A lot of people do need that visual representation of what it's going to be. They're also working under time constraints or budget constraints, so being able to calculate exactly how much material you need is beneficial. Don't get me wrong, I don't know anyone who needs to work like it or who does work like it. I just work differently, and I find that working the way that I do, my method, is what makes me happy and what makes me want to continue doing what I do every day. So putting boards together is not necessarily the funnest part of the job or the most exciting part of the job, but it does give you a brief glimpse of what your piece is going to look like by the end of it. Gives you a little bit of insight, a little bit of a story, a little bit of a guide as to where things go, how things look, what they're going to look like afterwards, and whether you've made a mistake in the beginning or not. I think when I was gluing these panels up, I started making a few of them and I labeled them up as shelves. And when I got halfway through the build, thankfully the shelves and the door faces were roughly the same size, and I ended up swapping them out because the ones that I'd chosen for the shelves were so much better. They had such a better story than the ones that I had originally chosen for the doors. So that's just another lesson in overcutting, making things bigger than what you need them to be, making sure that there is scope for change, making sure that there is room for error, and being able to adapt and go on the fly. These panel clamps are some of the best panel clamps that I've ever gotten. They recently started making them in South Africa, and tell you what, they're a game changer. The guys over in America are so spoiled for choice. It's absolutely ridiculous. The things that we have to do here to try and find something or pay the import and export duties it's crazy. So what I'm cutting up now is actually the main carcass of the cabinet. So I've done it in a long strip. This is to get a nice wraparound effect so that when the side meets the top meets the other side, it's a complete flow all the way from one side to the other side. This is one of the examples I'm talking about where you've got to sit back, choose your grain, choose the piece of wood correctly, make sure that it tells the story you want it to tell, make sure it's going in the direction that you want it to go.
Quick segue from sanding, and I just want to give a massive shout out to the sponsors of this video, and that is Rarewoods Timber South Africa. Rarewoods SA has one of the biggest selection of exotic timbers in South Africa, so if there's something that you need for a project, chances are you will find it there. They supplied me with all the walnut for this build for the Almari cabinet, and I'm so grateful to them. This wood is so good that even if your chisel skills are a little bit questionable, you're still going to get away with it. It's incredible to work with. Also picked up a few other samples there the other day. They've got off-ram, black off-ram, they've got wengi, they've got white oak. Go check them out, they are absolutely amazing. I'm also lucky enough to have them being a sponsor for Makers Festival, so go check the links down below to go and find out what Makers Festival is all about. You guys won't want to miss that. They are the best. Let's get back to building the Almari. This thing's not going to build itself, even though with this wood it probably could.
More hand planning after I've got the panels together, getting them all nice and flat, making sure that all the glue is gone. You don't want glue on the panels because you know that's just not show up when you put the finish on. The flatter you can clamp those boards together and the more in line you can get them, the less work you have to do on this side. There's a lot of work that goes into getting the panels ready before you can even get them cut to the right size. Just the more preparation you do in the beginning, the better. Making sure everything's flat, making sure everything's level, making sure all the glue is gone before you start assembling the project or assembling your pieces is vital. It's one thing that I've learned over the years is where you try and take shortcuts in the beginning because you think that you just want to get it done and you decide to skip a step you know you should have done. When you get down to the nuts and bolts of it towards the end of the project, you realize that had you just spent that extra 15 minutes making that one change, it would have saved you 3 or 4 hours towards the end of the build. Measure twice, cut once. That's the rule of thumb in the woodworking industry. It's the rule of thumb in every industry, and it can translate and transfer over to any application that you do. So what you see me doing here now is I'm marking out finger joints for the carcass for the top section of the cabinets, just marking which side is the waste make and which side is the good side, which side is the keep side, which is the waste side. Always a great idea to make sure that you mark everything properly, make sure that everything is lined up. Also, measuring board on board is a good way of ensuring that everything's going to line up 100% correctly. In some of my videos, you'll probably see me using a little yellow pen like that. That's all down to my kids. We were at a pharmacy one day, busy buying some bits and pieces that we needed for the house, and these pens were at the counter. They have got the finest tip on them that makes the cleanest line, and they are the cutest little things to boot. So every time we go to the shop, we go and buy a different one, a different color one. I've got purple ones, I've got pink ones, I've got white ones, I've got the yellow one is my favorite. It's the best weighted in my head. But yeah, so keep an eye out on all the other videos, see if you can spot them and tag something in the comments below. Every now and then I do like to use a jig just to make sure that everything stays 100% straight. I'm using the flush cut saw on here now, but that's only because this Veritas right angle guide doesn't allow you to use any other saws in there. It's a little bit of a downer, but it does the job. It keeps it nice and straight, keeps everything nice and square, making sure that you only have to do this once. The reason I used the guide was possibly I was a little bit nervous of making a mistake with those and getting those joints wrong. So I used the guide to make 100% sure. I don't generally use it if I'm using dovetails, doing dovetails or anything like that. I'll normally freehand it, a lot more confidence. But I think because this piece of wood was so big and there was so much resting on the fact that this would actually line up 100% correctly, sometimes you just want to play it safe. Sometimes you just want to make 100% sure that what you're doing is correct. And I didn't really want to make this again if I'd messed it up. So I figured, let me just use the guide. Let me get this right. I just want to circle back to the drawing of your pieces before you start doing them. Look, I've got nothing against blueprints. Some people thrive on them. Me, I'm a sketch on a scrap and figure it out in the bench can I go. The building process isn't linear, it's jazz. One riff leads to another, and sometimes the best ideas show up halfway through the glue up. These finger joints that I'm doing as an example of that, I was going to do just normal housing joints or a Dado or something like that, but I was inspired by another guy when I was looking at one of his pieces and I saw these finger joints that he did, and what it is 3 little fingers on the front end and 3 little fingers on the back end with the mitre cut on the face so that they line up nice and perfectly, and then there's one big, call it a kind of a half lap joint that goes in the middle. So it's a strange kind of joint. It's not the traditional kind of joint that you would normally use in these kinds of applications, but I just love the subtlety of it. It looks complex, but it isn't complex. In all reality, it's one of the simplest things you can make. But this is one of those instances where I'm saying that you might have an idea in the beginning, but as you go through with the build, you start deciding, maybe I want to do this, maybe I want to do that, and see how it goes. Look, I know it was a little bit risky doing this halfway through the build after I'd already made these panels, and I already said I used that guide to ensure that I didn't make a mistake with these things. So changing the design, in my mind at least halfway through, was also risky. But it's exciting to not know what you're going to do next. It's exciting to have something that you've got a sort of an idea of what your plan's going to be, but then when you change it halfway through, it's a little bit exciting not knowing what's coming next. It keeps you going. Also, a lot more easy ways of taking out this material, but true to form, I enjoy hammering and chiseling and enjoying the satisfaction of having a clean strip of wood at the end of it, and with having about 10 kilograms of dust less in the air. This is very therapeutic, very chilled. If you know how to do it properly, if you know how to chisel in a straight line, and you know how to read the grain, this is an excessively and uber satisfying way of removing waste. It also does take a lot of time, so that's one thing you're going to consider. I'm lucky in the fact that time is on my side when I'm building things like this, because I generally only build once-off bespoke pieces. I don't generally do commissions. It's a position where you kind of get to make what you like and then see who wants it afterwards. So I find that being able to have the luxury of time and patience to be able to get these things to fit together perfectly it's very rewarding and very fulfilling. So now I'm going to start with the internals of the cabinet. I've got the surrounds done top, bottom, and the two sides. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start doing some dado joints. So marking everything up as much as you can, making 100% sure that what you've done is accurate.
I just want to show you how I've started doing my dado grooves. I used to do them with the router bit, lots of dust, lots of noise, very annoying, very irritating. And the more I do woodwork, the more I prefer to do things by hand with the quietness. You can get time to think. So I'm going to show you how I do these dados with a hammer and chisel, a marking knife and a square. It's a groove that's going to go down the center of that board, one on that board, and then these two boards will then go on top of each other. It's a dividing panel that I'm making a dado for, and then we will do the rabbits on the other side. This is a Paul Sellers method, so if you want to watch his video, check the link down below in the description and you can watch how he shows the video as well. Right, so the first thing I've done is I've marked where my dado is going to go. Just for reference sake, a dado is a groove that goes across the grain. A groove is a groove that runs with the grain. So what I've done is I've marked out my two reference lines. This is 12 millimeters wide, mostly because I've got a 12 millimeter chisel. So when it comes out to cleaning in the corners up here, on this side especially, you will see that having a groove the right size of your chisel will come in handy. The wood that I am putting in here is 18 millimeters thick. So the shoulder on the upright is going to be a 6 by 6 millimeter rebate on the one corner. One side will be flush, one side will be rebated, slot in there 6 millimeters deep. It's also stopped short on the front here, so it's called a stop dado, so it doesn't go all the way through from the back to the front. I'm leaving it short on the front here so that you've got a nice clean edge so you don't see that shoulder line on the inside, and the upright will also stop about 10 millimeters short of the front of the unit. I reference the two boards against each other so that they are perfectly in line. That way we can have a perfectly perpendicular board in between the base and the top. So I'll just show you quickly how I did that. Good. So these are my two boards, my top and my base. And what I've done is I have flipped them over like that, lined them up on the edges. This is going to be an open cabinet on this side. What I did was measured in the distance to there. Whatever that side is there, I'm going to put a shelf across and cupboard doors. And then I'll take my set square, mark it up on the back side, make sure your square is straight. Need to line across from top to bottom, move over to your 12 millimeter gap line, shoot a line across both boards at the same time so that you know that they are perfectly in line. Once you flip it over, that upright will be straight. Okay, so I'm going to make sure your table's clear, every debris underneath. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark out my knife wall lines. So you can take your marking gauge to mark out your front line here. You can also then keep this marking gauge set to that mark so you can do both boards at the same time. I'm just going to mark that with the light pass first and then get a little bit harder there. But we're also going to use a router plane just to clean up the base of this Dado when we're done. Alright, so I've got my board clamped down. I've got my knife wall on my shoulder on the stop edge there. So I'm going to take my square now, set it on the line. I've got a beveled knife, so I use my flat side on the outside. I will do a light pass until my shoulder. Then I will gradually do a couple of deeper passes so that my knife wall is well established. What I will do now is I'm going to move my square onto the other side of the line. I'm going to use a different cutting knife that's got a bevel on the other side so I can get a nice straight wall down that side. Just quickly while I'm here is just to show you that I used my marking gauge and made a 6 millimeter deep line on the bottom, and then used my combination square, put my knife in the groove in that previous wall and just made a line up, and then did the same thing on the other side. And this is going to be removed all the way through till that stop over there. So now that we've got those marks at the end, we've got our knife walls in there, we've got that there, what we're going to start doing now is start chopping. and I'm going to use the widest chisel that I've got. This is a 1.5 inch chisel, 30mm, and a reasonably sized mallet. So the way we're going to do it is we're going to start chopping from the back all the way to the front at an angle, getting that depth slightly down. Then we'll run our knife in there one more time, and then we'll go slightly deeper on both sides. And then on the third pass, what we will do is we'll use the chisel to chop down with the drop down edge of this, and then we'll pull out the righter plane. So I'm going to be doing this bevel up. The chisel of the bevel is on the top side. You do about 5mm back towards the back corner, nice sturdy grip, not too deep, just so you can flick that out of there. Nice. Flick it out all the way through. Now I did mention that I've got a knot over here, so that is going to be a little bit more tricky when you laminate wood together. I'm just going to use a smaller chisel on this knot here just to avoid any hiccups, and go slightly lighter tap because I don't want any tear out, because you don't know which way this knot is going to be running the grain. It's all twisty and gnarly. Let's continue with this one just past this other small knot here. As we get past there, and go back to the bigger one. You don't want to go too deep. Remember, your knife only went down maybe 1.5 mil, so you don't want to go too aggressively and tear out any other fibers that are underneath there. Now that that's done there, I'm just going to cut this again with my knife to get that knife wall deeper again. Now that it's got some space, put my gauge in there, move my square up to it, and then just go a couple of times. Just do this for the first 2 rounds, so 2 rounds of cutting like that. So now all these other bits should peel out relatively easily. So now what we do is we go back another 3mm, 2 or 3mm, just go back in there and just go slightly deeper than we did the first time, just alleviating pressure every time we go a little bit deeper, so the chisel's got more space to move around. So I do the knife wall 2 times just to establish a nice deep reference point, and then I will go with the chisel straight down next time. Now I will take the chisel and I will go straight down into that back corner. 1 tap down and move over to the next one. Now what you'll see is all of those other fibers there will start peeling out. Gives you a nice deep reference point to get inside that cut line using that shoulder. We're not hitting hard enough to move the chisel backwards. Okay, now we go back and we go about halfway in. Now we should be able to get out a little bit deeper here now. See, it's coming out nicely there. Right, now we're going to start on the other side. I do not like to hammer that way, so I'm going to flip the board around. Right, let's go back this way. So we're causing like a little valley in the middle, little peak, sorry. If you start hammering and you can see that it's looking like it's not going, rather pull back. I can see this here over this harder wood here in the middle. It's not as deep, so I'm just going a bit more gently on that side, taking out a much smaller piece. Back in here again quickly. Now I can go and put it on the point of that and just go a little bit steeper just to get that out. So now we're actually going down the whole way across. So I must be careful of this section here. Okay, so now I'm going to go straight down. Solid blows. Now I'm going to go right down a little bit further, and I'll work the other side again. We're almost at depth that side, so I'm actually going to trim out this side here now while we're in this position. If you notice what I do with my chisel is I use the back end of the chisel and reference it in the chop that we've just done, and then bring it forward so that the back is flush with that knife edge there. So find that you must step back a bit as you're going, else you cramp yourself up a bit too much. You get used to one stance, and my stance, chisel in about that distance. So whenever you move, you want to walk back so that you're the same distance away with your chisel, so that you've got muscle memory of how you hold your chisel, how you hold your hammer. You're going to get a good result. Right, so after chiseling out with the chisel and just taking off that hump, I've got the router plane out, and I'm just going to set it half turn down. I'm going to work my way from the front backwards. That way there's less material to pull out in front of it. Just go gingerly. I know you're going to get the lines here. I must actually put a board underneath here. That's looking pretty good. I'm just checking my height here. I can see my cut line. I'm just above my cut line, so I'll go one pass with this. And go from the back now to the front because I'm doing very shallow passes. Now I should be able to, I see I chiseled a little bit deep there, but hopefully I can get rid of that. So let's go down another half turn. One more half turn. Chisel in the corner there, just run it. Right, so that's the groove pretty much done. Altogether that took me about 20 minutes to make this, and shavings, no dust.
Right, so what you can see me doing now is winging it again and doing the leg design on the workbench. Don't know why I didn't just use a scrap piece of paper or something like that, but I decided let me draw this on here for reference, and maybe I'll use this design again in the future. So this was also something that I knew that I wanted to do in my mind. It wasn't exactly planned out. The angles, the lengths, the thicknesses or anything like that. I just started drawing it on the table and figuring out what I thought looked best, and this is what I came up with. As you can see, I'm putting the blue tape on the table and then scoring out some lines. So I did a rough drawing on the workbench itself and then put the blue tape down so that I could use my straight edge, cut away at the edges and see what it was going to look like before building it. So there you can see that I've got the top section referenced above the legs, so I could make sure that the overhang was going to be correct, that it was going to look roughly nice. And once I was happy with it, you can see that I had this one phenomenal piece of walnut that I left over from a previous table tennis table build that I had. And what I thought was amazing about this was that I was able to make all the legs, all four legs and the stretchers, everything out of one piece of wood. That would just ensure the quality, the consistent coloring of the wood. And the other amazing thing about doing it this way was that the grain could run continuously from the bottom of one leg all the way to the top, across the rail and all the way down the other leg, continuously from the same board. So the grain would match very much similar to the top of the cabinets, where it's a full wraparound from one, well, the top wasn't one piece of wood, but I mean, it's got the same grain running on the boards that were laminated together. So the same methodology was used on the base. So yeah, I'm cutting things up on the table saw. Just excuse that there's no riving knife there, guys. I've been shouted at this many times before. I promise you I'll put it back onto my saw. Do not take it off, ever. Right, so I've got the legs cut up into their rough shapes, and here I am referencing them against the blue tape that I've done on the draw, making sure my angles are correct, using a gauge, a bevel gauge, just to make 100% sure that I've got the correct angles, transferring all the lines in real time.
What I'm going to do is, this is my leg joint. I've worked out on my bevel here what the angle is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a simple half lap break. and then probably insert 2 dowels just to give it a bit of strength. I could do a tenon, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to round over the corners. So if I round over the corners, the chances of seeing the end of that dowel only a bit is going to come out. I don't want to do a through tenon because it's not going to give enough support on that side. So I'm going to do a simple half lap joint over the ends, with the front being the full piece, the half laps on the legs on the uprights being at the back of the front. So you've got a full stretcher across the front, and then the legs coming down. 1, 2, 3, 4 half laps that I'm going to do, and then the bits that I'm going to do between the front and the back is going to be 3 support structures. Those will be mortise and tenons. Let me do the half laps. Oh, and also I'm going to cut the 3 little stretches that go in the middle from that same piece of wood, the offcuts from the bottom of it. So literally every single piece of this base is made from the same piece of wood, so it should look superb afterwards. It should be completely uniform in color. There's a little bit of sapwood running down the back side of the left legs. Not too stressed about that. I like a little bit of detail on it. Ideally, you don't want to get sapwood on there, but I think I got it pretty close to having less than 5%, maybe 3% sapwood on there. So let me get these half laps knocked out and the base should be pretty much done.
I love doing hand woodworking. I love doing things with a marking knife, with a pen, with a pencil, with a square, with a chisel, with everything. So doing half laps like these, I know that half lap is on the lower end scale of traditional woodworking. It's an incredibly strong joint though, when you've got 2 flat long grain faces glued against each other, and if you can get them completely flat and completely uniform to marry up, it's one of the strongest joints that you can get. So this is what I'm doing now. I'm busy marking it out, marking everything up, lining all the legs up, lining all the joints together, chipping out a little shoulder against the side of the knife wall that I've made, and then hand sawing everything down to the right depth, making sure I follow the line, and then trimming and cleaning everything out with the chisel after that. There's nothing more satisfying that you can do. I find in the woodworking industry that if the more you work with hand tools, the more satisfied you'll be with your work afterwards. Look, it goes hand in hand with when it works, you are so satisfied. When it doesn't work and you've spent an hour trying to make one joint and it doesn't line up, it's excessively demoralizing. But you just got to keep going.
So we finished with the half laps on the legs now. Now what we've got to do is, they look too bulky just being straight like that with the normal one. So I've done the top one here, you can see it's got a bit of a chamfer. I've done a taper on the legs coming down to the point, and then a taper on the back. So what I need to do now is, I've done the front legs, I've done the front wrap, so I'm going to do the back side now. I'm going to reference it off this one. I've done it by hand, so I'm going to show you how I did it. So I've taken off the outside of the leg so it comes down. There's 2 ways that I can do this. Either I can cut it with a handsaw and then plane it flat to get it nice, or I can do it on the bandsaw. I'm going to do it on the bandsaw purely because the way that the grain's running, if I try and cut such a slight angle when I get to the top, it's going to leave a lot of mess, and then I'll flatten it with the hand plane. I've trimmed the sides now, so I've done the 2 legs like that. Like I said, I've done the other 2. Let's pop them in the plane. What I did was I kept the offcut to put it on the side slightly lower so that I can grip this in the bench so it doesn't rack up on me. So let's plane that nice and flat. We use a last long plane. So I'm just starting on the top here where the bandsaw blade, because it doesn't give a nice smooth, so it's a little bit of a bump there. So I'm just starting that to get it slightly lower, and then I'll go the full length. That's it. Quick as that. Couple of grain changes there, not too bad. Right, so once that side's done, flip it over to the other side. Got to check the grain here. There's a few knots in this one. See the high spot, so we'll start there again on the end. Feather that side down.
I just want to throw in that as much as I love hand tooling, every now and then you have to use a machine, because a machine some of the time is a little bit more accurate and a little stronger. Like I mentioned there, that there was a grain change in the wood, so if I was going to hand saw that, the saw tends to wander with the grain, so using a bandsaw is possibly the better choice in doing that. And like I said, because this wood is a unique piece of wood where it all wraps around, the last thing I wanted to do was actually mess up one piece and then have to substitute it for another little piece that would have been completely out of color. I did these mortise and tenons off camera. My recording got a little bit lazy towards the end, but these are the supports that go between the rails. Mortise and tenon those on each end, got a nice snug fitting absolutely perfect. So you can see that this base is nice and chunky and super strong because the cabinet that goes on top is quite weighty. So although these legs taper down into a small little pin at the bottom, that base that it's standing on is uber strong and more than capable of handling the weight. So that's the base all glued up, and let's go on to the next piece.
I'm going to do something now to the side of this cabinet. Where the glasses go in the cabinet, I don't really like that it's so closed off. So I had an idea to cut a section out here, round it off over the corners, and down like that. And then the middle shelf is going to kind of protrude out a little bit so that you've got access to the glasses from the side. It's a nice talking point, it's a nice visual. Look, if I don't get this right, I'm going to have to make the side panel again. So let's hope it's a good idea, but I think it's going to look cool. So I'm going to measure it out now and put it together and see what it looks like. So I'm going to take it 100 millimeters from the ends, from the top in, from the bottom up, and then from the back side I'm going to do 200 millimeters and then round these corners. I'm using Rubio on this build, so might as well use Rubio as the marker. I'll do this one in black pen so I can get a bit closer to the line. This line nicely, it's much more accurate like this. Okay, I think it's going to look good.
Again, so not drawing anything and cutting the side panel like that was an immense risk because I had no idea what it was going to look like afterwards. But that's the reason why I do this, is because that made this cabinet stand out so much more. It's such a talking point that had I not done that, it would have just been a boring box. And on these legs, I'm trimming off the corners here. You can see the way I'm doing it also with nice hand tools. I could have made a template. I've got a CNC machine, a small CNC machine that I could have made a template and rounded these corners of these legs, but it's just so much more satisfying doing it by hand, being able to trim it away. The dust is so much less as well. I don't generally work with a lot of other materials other than wood. I try and keep it 100% wood, but every now and then you got a piece like this that's made out of a rich walnut that something like this brass would just fit with it so well. And I had an idea for how I wanted to make the handles on the doors of the cabinet, and using brass was just an obvious choice. So cutting small discs here, getting them filed out by hand. Again, I could have done this on the CNC machine, and I probably will remake these on the CNC machine, because after doing them and installing them, I kind of stood back and realized that this is not my forte. Metalworking and hand filing, you can see it a little bit rough around the corners, a little bit rough around the edges. So I might redo those and actually replace those with CNC cut circles, just so you get a lot more uniformity and it just looks a lot better than doing it by hand. So here you can see me marking up on the doors where I want these little inserts to go. This is a shadow line door handle, circle, pull, reverse thing. I don't even know what to call it, but basically I'm inlaying the brass at the back of the door and then
doing a hole all the way through the door to the other side so that the brass is set back, but there's a finger grip between the two. It's all very complicated to explain. I was making this all up as I was going along, trying to think about ways of doing this. Again, I probably should have, I definitely could have, but I probably should have used a template or a router to get these circles. And again, I might change these doors for a little bit cleaner of a cut, but for the most part, the idea works out really well. Using a rasp on wood across the grain like this is super dangerous, and not dangerous in terms of you're gonna hurt yourself, but definitely dangerous in terms of you're gonna rip wood out when you don't want to rip wood out. And chiseling bits like this is also very time consuming and frustrating when you want the chisel to go in a certain direction. You think you know which direction the chisel is going to go in, and as soon as you put force behind that chisel, it moves in a different direction and frustrates the hell out of you. So I probably will look at doing something like this a little bit differently in future, but for the most part, I had fun doing this. I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed having the idea in mind. I enjoyed figuring it out as I went along. You can see there I'm putting the brass in the back now. That's the back side of it, and then on the other side is the finger grip. And for me, it came out pretty cool. Right, so after doing all of the prep work, making sure all the panels were the same size, getting all the joints done, it's now time for final sanding and making sure that all the internals of the cabinet fit nicely together, nice and smooth. This is just going to save you a lot of time from putting things together and then trying to get a little sander on the inside of a cabinet. It's not a fun story. So do your best to get everything prepped and done before you assemble everything. It's just going to save you so much time and so much heartache. It's one of those steps that I was saying where you think to yourself, I'll just do this later, but then you realize that had I done it in the first place, I would have been done with this job 5 days ago. You can see I'm busy putting on the back, and I know that the wood is going to move and it's quite a big back. So what I've done is I've done individual pieces with shiplap joints, so that'll leave about a 1mm gap between each panel. I don't generally like using plywood on the back. I prefer to do the whole job out of solid wood. So for that to work, it's pretty much a floating back where the back of the cabinet is not glued down, it's not attached. I've got small pins that hold those backs in place just to make sure if there is seasonal movement on this wood that it's not going to pull everything to pieces. Here we get down to the finishing stage of the cabinet, and I'm using my good friend Rubio Monocoat on this. For me, it leaves the best finish on walnuts. It looks absolutely stunning. It just brings out the grain, makes it pop. It is a one coat application, and it takes a bit of time to get used to and a bit of time to work, but once you know how it works, once you know how to use it properly, for me it's one of the best finishes. There's other finishes that I use on other woods, but on walnuts I haven't found anything that beats this. You may have also noticed there's a few other copper bars that running across the legs at the bottom of this cabinet. I didn't get the filming of that one to get it in there, but this is the Almari cabinet. You can see I did some pocket door hinges on there, but I wasn't stoked with the fact that you could see the mechanisms of the pocket door hinges, so I decided to again make something up on the fly and see how this would work. So I glued up another separate panel of wood, lined it up on the inside, and thought to myself that I need a way of being able to remove these panels, or at least when it's in a client's house, that the client needs a way, or another contractor or anyone like that will need a way to remove these panels without using any tools. And the best idea that I had was a simple idea, was just use magnets, was mounting magnets in the tops and bottoms of the cabinets and mounting magnets in the tops and bottoms of the panels. This way you can just slide the panel in, pop it out. You can get to all of the hardware, you can get to all of the mechanics, make sure that it's easily maintainable, and boom, there it goes. Looks nice. Pocket door done. Right guys, that's this video for the Almari cabinets. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below. Tell me what you thought. Tell me what you would do differently. Let me know. I'd love to chat. Watch out for the next video. Enjoy this one. Thanks guys.